Well, all the recent rumors of war arising from events in the Niger Republic seem to have distracted a lot of Nigerians from other matters of national importance, including the fact that Nigeria is slowly but steadily sliding towards insolvency and may even begin to default on our financial commitments if there is no remarkable change in the short term. The latest warning sign is that the country may shortly lose as much as 40% of our $134.1 billion foreign reserves because of inability to repay loans obtained by the Central Bank of Nigeria. For greater introspection on this, we are now being joined from our Rice Abuja studios by Paul Alaje, an economist and financial affairs analyst. Good morning, Paul. Good to have you join us today on The Morning Show.
Good morning, and thank you so very much for having me.
All right, you're more than welcome. Well, let's talk CBN. Let's talk where we are, given that very important story, expose you might want to call it, by Business Day, citing data from CBN's 2022 report, which shows a number of exposure arising, of course, from borrowings that the Apex Bank has engaged in. Talk to us about the implication of this and how it might affect, of course, foreign loans, be able to service our foreign loans and every issue around it. Also touch on it for us. Is this also about the failure of oversight by the National Assembly, who ordinarily ought to have been on top of this for the entire 8 years that the regime of President Muhammadu Buhari lasted, and for which not a single time was a report presented to the National Assembly? Talk to us about it.
Yeah, thank you so much once again. First of all, I think it's a concern for all financial persons or those that play within the sector that as much as 40% of our foreign reserve is under security lending. Usually, central bank around the world can have security lending just for smooth operation, but this should be for a temporary period of time, and this should not take as much as 40%, which is of course very significant, because that of course will be transferred back to the lender. But in the case of Nigeria, when we borrow this money and the lender wants the money back, then Nigeria should expect a more devalued naira. I will repeat, a more devalued naira. This is because what we have to defend the naira will now be lower by 40%. And that is why throughout under Emefiele, you notice that the central bank continued to intervene in the market, perhaps so that the international community, this kind of pressure will not be seen. Now, we have devalued, and a lot of implications for the recent devaluation. When we devalued, we are telling an average American or anybody in the world that have access to dollar that they can now buy more from Nigeria with less. That is the real meaning of devalue. Those outside can buy more with less. So if you have anybody, uncle, brother, friend, spouse, anybody abroad who has sent $1,000 before the devaluation announcement, they could buy anything worth more up to 400 and at official window less than 500,000. Today, they will buy nearly 700 or 1 million naira depending on the window. So here is the challenge. When we notice when the central bank foreign reserve is not sufficient to defend the exchange rate, the best advice central bank we get from financial experts, from international community, even from government sometimes that we have seen in recent time, is to further devalue. What is this all of this speaking to? We have poorly managed our reserves. We have poorly managed the foreign reserve of Nigeria. And of course, you are very correct when you spoke about the oversight function of the National Assembly. I think those in National Assembly are politicians. But what we have seen about 2 decades ago, we had the National Assembly have their own economic advisory committee, which was shadow in nature. They were not really known to the public. They helped the National Assembly to investigate, to understand some of the policy the then Central Bank Governor, Chukwuma Soludo, made. But in the case of the current central bank or the last 8 years, even those in executive that we know that they have the function to make economic better for generality of Nigeria, we wonder if they had an economic team in place. You know, from 1999 till today, Nigeria never had horrible economic policy like we had in the last 8 years. So, and you can see the effect, the continuation of that effect even on the country. So here is it. I think the Central Bank of Nigeria have gone rather too far by pushing as much as 40% of the foreign reserve. And let me also say this borrowing is not free. It comes at a cost. And what are we going to use to pay back? The same hard currency, US dollars if you like. When you convert, it's still the same US dollars. What it means is that instead of using lower amount of naira to pay back for every dollar, we now need even more money, which means government needs to look for more, either in taxation or part of the revenue realized from crude or money realized from custom duties will be used to service monies that have been borrowed simply because we want the atmosphere to appear that all is well. Meanwhile, in the real sense, all is not well. That is why audit is important, and we recommend it should be done not later than on an annual basis, unlike what we have not seen in the last 8 years. The challenge ahead may be more because with nearly 40% of the reserve going, I think government will need to work really very quickly and know that as the foreign reserve may actually be on life support, because figures that have been quoted over the years has been between $38 to $34 billion. When you knock off 40% of that amount, the question is, can we still really, in the real sense, defend the naira as we claim that we can come back and intervene in the markets?
Yeah, I mean, that is actually my question. Can we really defend the naira? I'd like for you to just highlight that. And, I'd like for you to help us understand that distrust around the foreign reserves, despite the CBN delivering the much needed reform in floating the currency back in June. Now, you have said that we have poorly managed our reserves. Some analysts are saying that they don't even trust, like you have said, the numbers that the CBN is stating. I think you said $38 billion. I mean, currently they're saying it's about 34.1. Those analysts believe that this is contributing to the apex bank's inability to clear FX backlogs till date.
I agree completely. Like I said, the usual figure quoted by Central Bank has been between $34 to $38 billion. We've never gone up more than that, and we have never seen something lower than that. In recent time, we saw the floating of naira. In the real sense, what we saw was the devaluation of naira. The implication and expectation was that we are going to have investors come to Nigeria. The question is, 2 months going, third month, after that policy has been made, rather than having Federal Reserve impacted positively by having increase in our Federal Reserve total, what we are seeing is that the Federal Reserve is even getting more emaciated. And don't be surprised when this is happening. The parallel market will receive the pulse because there will still be rationing going on at the commercial bank and any other window people may want to access the FX. So people will go back to the parallel market. And what you saw in the parallel market is over 900 naira, arguably nearly 1,000 naira. Do I think that will stop in recent time? I doubt. This is because the original thing, the real thing we should do is to create have an healthy reserve. So when government said they were going to leave the 14, it's like trying to unveil a masquerade of some sort without, so now we are trying to paint it red, trying to get powder for like women we use, just to paint it very good. But when you unveil, everything we see what is right behind on the other side. And this is what we are witnessing. So, but you see, the real argument here will be that why do we consistently devalue? And the advice that has been given to us by international community, and this is where I detour for from a lot of conversation that is going on around there, especially in the media space, also on the pages of a newspaper. This is where I have a different opinion. And I think we need to research more to see why we need to be very careful in taking our decision. Most of the time, what people say is, whenever your reserve is going down or you notice that you are not able to perform your obligation, the next thing you do is to devalue. So each time we devalue, in the mid-80s, we devalued. 90s, we devalued. Early 2000s, we devalued. In 2007 to 2010, we devalued. Under President Buhari, we devalued. President Tinubu, our devaluation is even more than 50%. Here is it. Should we continue to practice the same method and hope that things will be better? Are we not even exporting anything at all? So with all of this going on, why should we then say we devalue? Here is the real argument. Each time you devalue and you have not provided a substitute for what your population is buying, then you are telling your people to continue in agony, in pains, in hunger, in deprivation. This is because devaluation is a quick fix approach to solving FX challenge. The truth is that if people must still buy basic things that the economy does not produce, that due to inadequate power supply, manufacturing sector is not functioning, due to insecurity and logistic problem, farmers could not produce sufficiently what will be enough for the population, we still have to import food into the country. Then when you devalue, you are only postponing the evil day. Unfortunately, a football match is 90 minutes, which seems to be on the 80th minute, 10 minutes to go. How much can we do now with devaluation? Even if we devalue up to 1,000, 2,000 naira, if we don't chase the elephant, address what the elephant in the room, the big elephant in the room, which of course is production, which of course is infrastructural development, no matter quick fix approach that we adopt, I'm sorry, we might not have that solution come. So this is what the president and his team, and most especially the central bank, must look at. Remember, under Emefiele, we mentioned a policy of repatriating 200 billion naira into Nigeria. And I wonder, how are you going to do that when those that are leaving the country, your population, when they get abroad, they are called immigrants? How much are they paid? There is high disparity between what an African hen and somebody of a different color hen in any country, in most countries of the world. Don't let me generalize, in most countries of the world. So, but what kind of thing are they expecting from Africa? Artisans. Here in Nigeria, we don't even have a database for artisans to train them like they have done in Philippines when their population is going outside their country. The government of the country understands that they cannot compete with the Americans, but they understand that because the population, the global population may need them as front desk person and so on and so forth, they are trained for that purpose, and certain amounts statutorily go to the government of the country. But in our case, it is not obtainable. Government wants more money, has huge population, young people wants to leave the country. Government has provided relatively free education in most universities to our doctors, to nurses, and so many others. Now, when they are done and they realize that we don't have infrastructure to support the knowledge they have, they want to travel out, but government has not even made provision for those that will go out eventually. What comes back as that will be repatriated to the economy? And that is why when central bank made that announcement, I laughed, and you can check. The record speaks for itself. Since the time the policy was made till now, what has done? Remember again, the central bank has said, if you bring your dollar to official window, we are going to give you extra naira beyond what is obtainable at the official rate. That policy again ended up in failure. Why? Because when you say you want to do, you need to look at the forces of demand and supply. What will it cost people to take their money elsewhere and get a better value for it? So in the real sense, all the quick fixes approach don't work. What we need to do is, can we focus on production? And I would be very happy if President Bola Tinubu will think and rethink this economy to say what we need for our population is production, manufacturing, plantation, large-scale farming. It's not going to come by quick fixes of devaluing the naira. We have done that. What has changed? And you see, I spoke with your colleague, Mr. Omofaye. when the policy of devaluation and removal of subsidy was made. I said before subsidy was removed that don't try to remove subsidy if your refineries are not functioning. A number of persons quickly responded by saying by July, we're going to see Dangote refinery come mainstream, or first week or second week of August. We have since passed July and we're in August now. So all of these, if you don't do the right policy, your foreign reserve, and you keep devaluing, your foreign reserve will keep sending you memos. We keep sending you pressures, and you keep being pressurized because the right thing that should be done by government and those in authority have not been done even this moment today.
All right, Paul, I mean, very well said. And I like the fact that, you are breaking it down in a language that, practically everybody can understand. Quick fixes don't solve problems on a long term. My questions to you will be first, how do we walk back, to solving this problem? We know where we are. We know what galvanized the president, to make two important, policy decisions, but of course, which has turned out to look like maybe they were not properly thought through. The removal of subsidy and, of course, the floating of the naira. In the short run, nobody seems to be enjoying. People are really struggling. So first question, how do we walk back to do the right thing? You have mentioned the issue of production, but then in what specific areas will we be able to get quick answers, low-hanging fruit? I like the fact that you said that, how do you remove subsidy without fixing your refineries? We've been told now that by December, a Port Harcourt refinery will come back roaring to life, maybe at 60%. We do not know where we are as far as the Dangote refinery is. Will the majority of Nigerians be able to survive before we start seeing semblance of true reforms? That's one. Secondly, I like the fact that you touched on FX. Just a couple of days ago, the acting CBN governor, Fola Shonubi, attributed, the tragic fall of the naira to the fact that money coming from, remittances from the diaspora are going to the parallel market. Is he trying to say, and I'd like you to break that down for us, is he trying to say that because about the $80 to $20 billion in estimation from the diaspora are not going to the banks, rather they are going to the parallel market, that's why the naira is falling further? And how will arbitrage be saved if the I&E window is giving you $7.80 to $1, whereas at the parallel market it's $9.50 going to 1,000 naira? What really can we do? And it doesn't look like the acting CBN governor is speaking a language that is different from what we heard in the last 8 years of General Buhari.
Mr. Charles, if I dash you 1,000 naira today,
the name is Steve, sir.
Human being, economy speaks to...
Paul, the name is Steve.
Mr. Steve, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry,
Mr.
Steve. If I dash you $1,000 now,
yes,
where will you take it to? To bank, to collect official rate, or to parallel market to get parallel market rate? Because you are I don't need answers, but I guess what your answer will be. I'm an economist, so I get what your answer will be. As a rational being, chances are high that you go to parallel market rate. We are going to see this turmoil. The country is in economic turmoil, as business rightly put it. And we'll see turmoil for a relatively long, I'm tempted not to use the word long period of time, but maybe to a medium term. So what we are seeing now may not end by next week or next month or in 2 months' time, as many people are hoping. And people are also hoping that when this exchange rate goes up, suddenly it's going to crash somewhere without deliberate effort of those in authority to run some kinds of simulation, which can also now cause a reversal. I doubt if that will also happen because it does not agree to any economic sense. The third one is I'm also seeing people thinking that someday pump price will eventually go back to 189 or about 300. I doubt. Also because the impact of devaluation is what we are seeing. And you might even see an increase maybe in near time before the end of the year, seeing the value of PMS also going up. Because of that statement you quoted from the acting central bank governor, which says that most Nigerians in diaspora prefer to exchange their money at the parallel market, which means the challenge we have is supply side. The central bank is not having sufficient supply of, I've started mentioning the solution, by the way. The Central Bank of Nigeria is not having sufficient supply in terms of FX. That is one. So how do we solve supply problem? If we think around how to solve supply problem, then we can solve the challenge of FX disparity. Two, we are not having sufficient supply in terms of food. So we are not having sufficient supply in terms of production. We're also not having sufficient supply in terms of what we can export. Our problem lies around supply. Our population continues to grow at over 2% population growth rate. Our GDP is growing relatively slowly, but in terms of export, at a point where we can earn a lot of FX, we don't export sufficiently enough. The question is, if we don't export, then how are you going to earn FX when central bank cannot print the dollar? It's not possible. So what we need to do is to find a means, a window of improving on our supply. And I think what government should be looking at, the program, the segment you heard before this segment has to do with Ghana. Looking at $2 billion, and you quickly contrasted that with what Belgium is doing in terms of output from cocoa.
Yes.
The same is applicable to Nigeria. We export crude. When we export crude, what we get back is PMS, which is one, and diesel, which is another. Kerosene, we import them back to the country. Even our cocoa, what have we done with it? So here is it. Value addition for supply side to have significant increase. It's a major challenge. It's what we should solve. And let me now mention practical example, which I hope authority can take some of these example and find a way to find solution. Over 80% of the school uniform we wear in Nigeria today are imported. And you can think about it, Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, over 80% of the fabric are imported. We have a lot of young people. We have some places, I think in the 50s, Kaduna was known as the textile sector, the textiles state, maybe not state, textile zone, I beg your pardon, of the entire West Africa. Today, that infrastructure is seen as, that infrastructure is moribund and is a shadow of itself. Unlike what it used to be in the 50s, especially 56, 57, 58. Today, it's not the case anymore. What happens? Because of abandonment, because of discovery of crude, because of discouragement, across all sectors. And you can take Kaduna as example and relate it to the remaining part, of the country. So here is it. If we don't produce and you consume, then you will remain indebted. If you don't produce and you consume, then your currency will be worthless. This is exactly what we are seeing. So how do we say for 40 million pupils, how do we close by ourselves, producing the fabric, 50% of them? What we are spending to import school uniform will drastically reduce. How do we make refinery? We can't wait till December. This is not, we were promised that by early this year, that Port Harcourt refinery will work. We were promised that by May, before President Buhari leaves office, that refinery will work. Why do we keep changing the goalposts in the middle of the game? Meanwhile, people's income remains static. People's cost of living continue to increase. People's standard of living continue to emaciate. The value of currency continue to go down. And we hope that there will be an engine of economic recovery of some sort. It does not happen anyway. So for me, the solution will be, can we refocus on what the supply side is looking at? Can we start having a plantation? When I say plantation, instead of just telling people to go back to farm. The brilliant idea Mr. President said, he said he wants to support farmers, rice farmers, and corn farmers, and so on and so forth. He said he was going to support them. If we adopt the approach of anchor borrowers, remember that central bank gave billions of naira to rice farmers. Today, the price of rice jumped from what it was last month at about 35,000 to about 42 to 45,000. Why? Does it mean that the monies in the pocket of those farmers have disappeared? When you give things to people without control, without measurement, without performance measurement, it will go anyhow. So that is what we see. So if we're going to adopt another method and say we want to start distributing money to people, hoping that we can throw money at all problem, I can tell you it will cause inflation. The people we work in the short term, because it's a quick fix approach, like I always mention, it's a quick fix approach. If we don't solve the real issue, and the real issue here will be, can we organize plantation? We saw in the Western Nigeria, as part of Northern Nigeria at the time, when the leaders of those regions, including the Eastern Nigeria, which was very robust, very huge when it comes to oil production, can we organize, plantation where we can bring in those who are serving Nigeria, you call them core members. We can bring them on board and say, we need specimen 50 to 100 local government where the local government chairman or governors can release land for the federal government to partner. So we have federal, state, local government working with corpers, and young Nigerians are looking for jobs. Under the former Minister of Labour, we saw government said they were going to spend over 70 billion naira. 70 billion naira money were given to those who we cut grass. As the grass not grown again, can we plant this directly into productive activity that can increase supply of food to crash what we are having in inflation, and also to export so that naira can have value, unlike what we are seeing today? Because remittances alone will certainly not solve our problem.
Absolutely. I mean, on the head. We have to move from a consuming nation to a more productive nation. And I love the fact that you were able to clarify the fact that, the CBN doesn't have, sufficient supply of FX. I'd love for you to try to, try to make us understand this conversation out there where people are saying that the problem with FX rate is that banks are buying cheap dollars on the I&E window and pushing demand to the black market for, forex arbitrage, because as we speak today, only banks trade in the I&E window, and a possible solution could be, give licensed fintechs access to I&E, and the rates will probably collapse. Can you help us understand that?
Well, I've seen that argument. I can say that I cannot verify if commercial banks are given to the parallel market, if they are given to those exchanges. I cannot verify it. And it's important that I have facts before I can make a claim, especially on a credible national television as this. So it will be very difficult for me to make a direct assertion as to whether or not the commercial banks in Nigeria are having those sharp practices. But this is what is clear. Commercial bank alone, if central bank has the confidence that he has sufficient supply, that is when you can increase the number of operators. But my real doubt is that when you remove the 40%, even the remainder, less than 60%, because it's about 40.7, the remainder of 59.3, arguably, we also don't have it in cash at the central bank. I'm also of the opinion, and this could be verified, that there are other assets that have been added to our foreign reserve. So I would just love to leave it at that. So the central bank as a body, as an institution, don't have sufficient FX. So a lot of people want to eat cake, but nobody is planning on how to bake it. Our real challenge is not whether the rate will increase or crash. Our real challenge is in the real sector, which is production. Government is eyeing more investors into Nigeria. Since we have made policy, even the least entry point as investment in Nigeria, which of course is the market, the portfolio investors. How many of them have been attracted into our economy since the policy has been made? This is because we have not solved the real problem. The real problem is production. The real problem is manufacturing. The real problem is supply side. It is that sector that will support the central bank to improve the value of naira. Anytime we are focusing on having more operators, maybe fintechs, or having going back to the regime of BDC issuing licenses and so on and so forth, we are still going to have that gap between what is applicable at the official rate and what is applicable at the parallel market. We are still going to have the gap. So here is it. We must produce for us to significantly reduce what the FX rate is saying today.
Absolutely, from consumption to production. Thank you so much, Paul Alaje, an economist and a financial analyst. We've enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining us on the morning show today.